In this presentation, we're going to look at using tables in PowerPoint presentations. To meet accessibility standards, tables are not used to create layout. Tables are used to contain data. There should not be any blank cells, and cells should not be merged. You can create the look of a merged cell, however, that is a subject for another time. Our learning objectives for this presentation are to use the accessibility checker, add decimal tabs to an existing table, add alt text to a table, add decimal tabs to a new table, and describe why accessible formatting is important. I've chosen this topic because I frequently see multiple blank spaces used in tables in PowerPoint presentations and Word documents to create alignment on the decimal point. It appears that the accessibility checker no longer flags multiple blank lines and spaces. However, problems still exist when screen readers encounter these situations. With the PowerPoint presentation open, I'm going to run the accessibility checker to determine if it finds any accessibility issues in the presentation. To run the accessibility checker, I will click on the File tab. Click Info on the left-hand panel. Click the drop-down arrow next to the icon for Check for Issues, and select Check Accessibility from the menu that appears. At this point, there are no accessibility issues located by the accessibility checker. The accessibility checker is a great place to start, but it does not find all the issues in a presentation. I'll close the accessibility pane. I will now scroll down the presentation until I find the first slide that contains a table. The table looks pretty good. The cost values in the third column appear to align along the decimal point. Let's look inside the table to see how this alignment was created. I'm first going to click in the cell that contains 1100. When I look at the ruler at the top of the slide window, I can see that the value was indented and no tabs were used. I'm going to now click in the cell that shows 900. I can see here that the value was also indented and blank spaces were used to move the number to the right until the decimal point aligned with the value above it. How do I know that? I can see that the indent indicator has not moved, but the value has. I can also click immediately to the left of the 9 and 900 and press the backspace key to see if the value moves. When I press the key, you can see that the value moves to the left. These alignments were created using blank spaces. Fixing an existing table in a PowerPoint slide, particularly a table as long as this one, can be kind of a hassle. Unfortunately, we need to do it to ensure compliance with accessibility standards. You might ask, why don't we do this in Excel where formatting numbers is easy and embed the spreadsheet in our slide? Accessibility standards recommend that we do not embed an object from another software application in our. There are known issues with screen readers being able to read embedded objects. I'm going to try to make fixing this table as easy as possible. I'm going to leave the indent because it works. However, I'm going to remove all the excess spaces added to the left of the values. Now that I've removed the excess spaces, I'm going to align the first value with the decimal tab. I will click in the second row of the third column. In the upper left-hand corner, you will see an icon with a figure that looks like an L in it. That L-looking character represents a left tab stop. When I click on the icon, the character will change to a center tab. When I click it again, it will change to a right align tab. When I click it again, it changes to a decimal tab stop. The decimal tab looks like the center align tab with a dot to the right of the character. The decimal tab is now my active tab setting. I can click on the ruler above the column in which I wish to set the decimal align tab stop. I'm going to click on the ruler approximately above the decimal in the first value. The tab character appears on the ruler. If I'm not happy with a location, I can pull the tab character to the left or the right. To check to see if the tab is working, I will click to the left of the value, hold down the Control key, and press the Tab key. The value moves slightly to the right. Again, if you are not happy with a location, you can move the tab by dragging the tab character to the left or the right. I now have the option of setting the tab stops at the same position in each one of the cells in this column. To do that, I will note that my tab stop is at 1 inch. I will click in the cell immediately below and set the tab in the same manner that I did with the first cell. I will have to repeat the process of clicking to the left of the value, holding down the Control key, and pressing the Tab key. This method will accomplish the job of setting the tabs. I can also use the Format Painter to copy the formatting from one of the cells that is formatted correctly to the other cells in the column. To do this, I will select the entire cell, click on the Format Painter, click in the next cell containing a value, and while holding down the left mouse button, drag through to the bottom of the column and release the left mouse button. The decimal tab has been added to each of those cells. However, you will still need to accomplish the alignment by clicking to the left of each value, holding down the Control key, and pressing the Tab key. Before we move on and create a new table, we're going to add alt text to our existing table. There are several appropriate methods for adding alt text to a table. One that I prefer is to indicate the number of columns and rows in the table and the location of the headers. This table has only a header row. It does not have a header column. It contains 3 columns and 13 rows showing software, compatibility, and cost. Cost is shown in US dollars. To add the alt text, I will make sure that the table is selected and right-click on the border. From the menu that comes up, I will select Edit Alt Text. The alt text pane will appear on the right-hand side of the PowerPoint window. We need to keep the alt text brief and descriptive. I will write a 3-column, 13-row table showing screen reader software compatibility and cost in US dollars. Let's close the alt text pane and move to the table design example slide and create a new table that we will format correctly from the onset. This is a title and content layout. One of the options that we can see available within the content object is Insert Table. I'm going to click it and choose 3 columns and 2 rows. Although my table is intended to be 13 rows long, I don't have to choose that when I'm creating the table. When I get to the last cell in a table, I can press the Tab key to add another row to the table. The first row is the header row, and the second is the beginning of the data. The Table Design tab is now active, and the table appears in the content placeholder. If I want to dress up the table a bit, I can choose a style from the Table Style group on the ribbon. I will click the drop-down arrow to the right of the example styles and choose a style with contrast. Medium Style 1 works for me. I also like to have borders around my cells. With the table still selected, I'm going to click the drop-down arrow to the right of Borders in the Table Styles group and select All Borders. I will start my table by clicking in the first cell and keying in my first heading. I'm going to duplicate the table that we worked on in the prior slide by keying in Software, Compatibility, and Cost, US dollars. In the second row, I will begin typing the values from the screen reader software table example from the prior slide. When I get to the cost cell, I'm going to set the decimal tab stop. Hold down my control key, press the tab key, and then type in my first value. The decimal tab stop is still showing in the left-hand corner. I set the decimal tab at 1.5 on the ruler. Now I'll press Control Tab and enter my first value. You can see that the value is aligning along the decimal point at 1.5 inches on the ruler. If I'm not happy with that setting, I can move the tab stop by pulling it to the left or right. I pulled the tab stop to 1 inch on the ruler. Now I will press the Tab key to create a new row in the table. I'll enter the name of the software, press the Tab key, key the compatibility, press the Tab key, and note the position of the decimal aligned tab on the ruler. It is already set in the proper position, so I can press Control and Tab, enter my value, and move on. As you can see, setting up the table properly to begin with is a fairly simple process. Fixing the table to remove excess blank spaces, particularly with a long table like we used in the example here, can have several steps. But as you also saw, once we have the first cell formatted correctly, we could use the Format Painter to copy those settings to additional cells. To reiterate what we've done here, we've used the Accessibility Checker to locate issues in accessibility in the presentation. Although none were found by the checker, a manual review surfaced multiple blank lines in the table and missing alt text for the table.